All right, so we are good to go. And I'm going to start with the PDF, the presentation PDF. And then I'm going to get out because it's the pretty version, and I'm going to get out of it. And then I'll actually show you what I call the dirty version, which is my spreadsheet, so that you can kind of see the process of how we got to where we are today. So I'm really excited about the data and how we can use it. So let's see what we think. Share. Okay. So this project came to be when I was working underneath the umbrella of ruralorganizing.org, right? And so I had finished their rural organizer. It's an exit interview project that we did. I interviewed 22 organizers all across the country to find out what worked, what didn't work, what do we need more of, like, besides money, all of those different things. I talked to rural organizers all across the country. And then I finished that, and they had a top 100 rural county project that they were just getting started. And the way that I started to go about that was a little bit different than what was being done. So they kind of said, here, this can be your new baby and see what you come up with. And so what I did was we put together what we call the top 100 rural counties for power building. And so the key to remember is that we had counties or electoral districts that made the power list, but then there were others that are still there that are still relevant. So it doesn't mean that just because they're not on the power list that they're not worth organizing. They absolutely are, but this is just like one short-term piece to a much longer strategy. There were 17 states that ended up making the cut for this, Alaska being one of them. So we're going to kind of go through those. For you guys, these are all the races that I looked at. So I went through your 2020 presidential election results, your 2020 Senate, your 2020 House, and you guys had weird stuff. Like there was like a race that just said Senate, and then there was another race that said Senate, and it had districts like A and K and all kinds of stuff. I'm going to show you what all I got out of this. So maybe you can shed some light. And then I did the same thing in 2022, including your gubernatorial results. And then we're going to take a peek at voter registration, voter turnout, state population, percent rural, because all of those things play and they factor into how we can use this data. So this is the process. What I did was I looked at our states to see where did we have battleground states, swing states, and states that where we had margins that were 10% or less. And then I kind of looked at, okay, so where do we have, electorates and things like that. And then once I identified those states, I looked at the rural counties within that state. So counties that had margins of 10% or less for each of those elections. So imagine for the presidential election, I'm writing down the counties or electoral districts, and then I'm doing the same thing for all the other races. And then I cross-reference those to see which electoral districts were showing up in repeated elections across the span of 3 years. And then identified which ones were showing up the most. And so once I had those, then I took a look at what were their populations and what was their percent rural. Why is that important? Because, the list that we were making at the time was the power building list. So I had some counties in some states that had 800 people or 2,000 people. And those aren't places, even though their margins might be super close, when we're talking about building power, it's not a place that we want to put all of our resources. So that's why we wanted to come do these deep dives so that you could see everything, even the ones that didn't make the power list, right? And then once we got those together, we started to look at were there commonalities in seats that could be flipped or races and things like that. So Andre is going to hear this for the third time today, but the best example that I can give you is Colorado. So I'm going through this very data-driven process to funnel down, and I get to Colorado and I have 10 states that I've identified that meet all of these requirements. But then when I was looking at their House seat, 7 of the 10 were all in Bobart's district, right? So those 7 made the power building list, but all 10 are relevant to Colorado. So that was how we got to where we are. So ranked voting and independent candidates really produced some challenges when I looked at Alaska's data, especially in 2022 for the gubernatorial and Senate races. But the presidential race is a different story, right? there was a 10% margin, 36,173 votes. So we're going to take a look at these 4 electoral districts and then a couple of others that made my list, because there was a lot of registered voters who didn't cast a ballot that are available for us to make some significant progress. To give you an idea, there's about 69.39% of the voting difference in the 2020 election that can be made up in just those 4 electoral districts. So kind of show you guys what that looks like. This is the pretty version, right? It's all clean and nice, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about, where these are the counties or electoral districts. These are the number of total votes and then how they break down in between Dems, representative Republicans, and then other votes. And you'll see this. Now, this is what was interesting. In 2020, I found data for like, it was weird. It was like for more than one type of race, and one of them had the district listed like this, and the other one didn't. So I have compiled all of your data because I'm assuming you all know what all of this means. I don't know why it's all like this, but it is. So you're going to get all of it to play with, and hopefully it will be really beneficial to you. So let me show you what it looked like on my dirty side, okay? And when I say dirty side, I just mean because it's all color coded and and all kinds of stuff. But let me pull it up for you. 100 rural counties. Here we go. And I want to go to the top and back to Zoom. Okay. So this is what my version looked like. And so what I started doing, like I said before, was really taking a look, and you can see these electoral districts, and then I highlighted the ones with really close margins and did that across different campaigns, different elections, and looking at the population and state rank and all of that. Now, you guys were tough on me because electoral districts didn't equate to, like, I couldn't find a list that said these specific counties are involved in these districts. And I was like, oh my gosh. So anyway, I'm going to kind of show you like kind of how this looks. When we looked at voting data, here were the populations for these electoral districts, and these were the folks that were registered to vote in 2020. And you'll see voter registration is super high. Now, I don't know if that's because when you all get a driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote, or if it's because you have folks that are really making sure that they are registered to vote. Because when it comes to the actual presidential election, your voter turnout was as low as 32% and as high as 67%, but your registrations were all 75 to 90%. You had some of the highest registration rates of any other place, right? So it's automatic when a person files for the state PFD. Tell me what a PFD is. Permanent fund of dividend. Got it. Got it. See, this is so great to know, because like even in Georgia, we had this where you have to check the box, but it's not an automatic thing that happens. So one of the things that I think is so great about this is this shows us where we need to put the money. So some people, like Andre has heard me talk about this, there's a difference between voter registration and get out the vote. It's not going to be registration that's an issue for you guys. It's discerning who actually is participating in the process and getting people to understand why it's so important, because your voter registration is super duper through the roof, but yet voter turnout is really low. So the question becomes, why aren't people exercising something that is so automatic, right? And so do they have politic fatigue? Do they not believe in the process? Have they lost interest and been kind of burned by the system and how it works? What are those things that's happening in Alaska that's causing people to simply just not turn out? When I saw like this, the governor's race, 18% voter turnout, I was like, oh my gosh, that's absolutely astounding to me. And the reason, like, I look at gubernatorial elections for 2 reasons. One, I worked the Stacey Abrams campaign last cycle, right? So those things are kind of like near and dear to my heart. But number 2, when I went to work for that campaign, I said to my grandkids, I said, listen, Tutu is going to be working a campaign for the governor, for the next governor of Georgia. And I said, so I can't just get you guys all the time. And at the time he was 8. So my 8-year-old grandson said, Tutu, what's a governor? right? And a lot of people don't realize what the governor is, right? And I said, well, so baby, you know how we have, the 50 states in the country? And he said, yeah. And I said, and we have one president that's over all the states? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, a governor is like the president of your state, right? And he goes, oh, okay, I got it. And so that was his thing, was my tutu's going to work for the next president of Georgia. That's the way he said it. But I found that explaining that to people when I was out on the campaign trail was huge. Voter registration is automatic. Okay, I'm reading comments as we go. So we have big issues with mail-in ballots and no postal workers or postmasters. Oof. In rural communities, postmarks are not marked to meet the mail-in deadline. Got it. Okay, so that's good. That's good to know. So we're gonna talk about that. Bookmark that from you, Maggie, because when we talk about how to use this data, we're going to circle back around to that. So GOTV and voter engagement would be two things automatically. So when I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to funders, and in Alaska, I'm going to say, listen, we've already cleared one hurdle, right? It's not getting people registered to vote. We need to get people engaged. And so finding out what are the main issues in these areas is going to be how we piggyback into a political campaign. The most successful political campaigns are campaigns that are built on the backs of issue campaigns, because issue is always tied to emotion. And emotion is what brings people out of their house to actually go vote. So what I did when I went through this was I took a look at your presidential votes, like the total, and then your Dem votes, your Republican votes, your other votes, and then what would happen if you won the other category. And then it became like really cool to look and see, well, how close are these things? And a lot of your races were ridiculously close. If you look at election district 26, I mean, it was like, holy crap, like you can make any of these things really happen across the board. Let me see, where was the one? You all had one that I went, really? That's all there was? Is it 22 maybe? Anyway, no, right here, 15. That's like 49 votes between these two, and you had 313 people that voted other. So those were people who were in the booth. They were engaged, they cast a ballot, and because we didn't reach those unaffiliated voters for whatever reason, we did not win this seat. And so that's why it's so important to look at this data to see, well, what would happen if we just won the other votes, the people who already are voting. If you won the votes that are already being cast, you would win every single one of these except one. You would have won 1, 15, 20, 20, 22, 22, 23, 28, and 35 if the folks that voted other had simply voted for the Dems. So where did we miss the messaging there? Was it the candidate? Was it an issue? Where did we fall through? And that's something that you have to take notice of, because when I got to see your independent votes, when that happened, I saw races go from being that close to being huge. So I'm going to go down here to your gubernatorial. Do you see the numbers, the difference in these numbers? It was 300 and some up above, and now that number is 1764, and now you only have 1,100 Dem votes. That's because whenever you guys had a race where you now had an independent choice, a Democrat choice, and a Republican choice, it almost always cut that Dem number by 30 to 50%. Every single time, hands down, no bones about it. So I would love to get you all's take on that, because it's definitely something that you can see in the numbers. And what has been the talk or the strategy on how to overcome that? Because that's literally, if I take 3,293 votes and then I go down here to 2022, if I add 1169 and 1764, I come real close to that number. So you've lost your Dem vote to the independent. And because of that, we've put our eggs in two separate baskets, and nobody's winning except for the Republican candidate. You see the difference between that from one year to the next? Anybody got any thoughts on that or feedback for me, and how you all saw that play out yourselves? Don't be shy. No, it's just something that I would think that you all are definitely aware of. I know when I saw it, I immediately reached out to Afton and Matt and I said, holy crap, like that third party, that independent vote really hurt the Progressive Initiative in Alaska. Yes, Maggie.
Yeah, I'm happy to see other people from Alaska on here. That's awesome. And thank you for doing this. You know, independent in Alaska doesn't always mean an independent party. A lot of people register as nonpartisan or call themselves independent, but aren't affiliated with the independent party. And yeah, that's something we're very aware of, and we're working on reaching out to those voters for sure.
Yeah, I saw that and my heart was like, oh my gosh, like we just lost half of the numbers. And it was true for every single race in 2022 that I took a look at. And the numbers were just astounding to me. So I knew that you all had to be aware. When you say that you guys are talking about like how to reach out to those voters, what do you think? Because they voted Democrat previously, the majority of them, based on what the numbers show us, right? Because it's not like the Republican numbers increased by a bajillion, because they didn't. So like if I look at the Republican numbers in 2020 for senator, 3,487, 3,500, right, for president. When I jump down here and I get into 2022, those numbers are about the same, 3,800. Now your senator votes, I don't know why this is. Maybe I don't know why this is, but they were all Republican for your senator votes. But 3,600 when it comes down to your rep votes and things like that. So it's not like they just switched when it comes to your gubernatorial and your representative elections. That it just like doubled or tripled on the Republican side. It definitely split. So what do you think the issues were that made someone that was previously voting Democratic vote for that independent choice, that independent candidate over that Democratic candidate? What do you think? Go ahead.
I think Alaskans really, there are definitely Alaskans who are strongly partisan, but I think if you took all of them, Democrats and Republicans, they would be a minority. And Alaskans vote for people, not for party, or they vote for issues, like you said, not for party.
Right. Yeah. So here's your voter breakdown. And not every state does this, right? I love the states that do, but not every state breaks it down and says, these are the folks that are registered Dems. These are the folks that are registered Republican. And these are the folks that are unaffiliated. And then you all even have nonpartisan, right? So I've got Democrat, Republican, independent, unaffiliated, and nonpartisan. And the unaffiliated is the most, right? So when we talk about voting for the person and the issues, if you were going to give me the top 2 issues in Alaska, what do you think it would be?
I think for the governor race, it was definitely the PFD, because there's a lot of different viewpoints on that. And the Republican candidate, wanted a full PFD so people see money in their pocket. I think that was, in my opinion.
Yeah. Does everybody agree with that and think that that's what it was? So
Yeah,
share with me what the PFD is.
That permanent fund dividend. So by promising a $3,000 or $4,000 permanent fund dividend instead of a $1,300 permanent fund dividend for every Alaskan, including the kids, it's makes a big difference to the families.
100%. I get that. Got that. Okay. So, so I have this theory that I kind of hold on to when it comes to organizing, that, every issue comes back to one of four things. That's either housing, healthcare, housing, education, or economic stability, right? So 100%, I hear gubernatorial race was economic stability, right? Easy. What do you think some of the other issues were, from 2020 to now, that caused the shift from, the Democratic votes to the independent votes? And how do you all think that that works on the national level? So like if how does that work when you look at, who you send to Congress and how they vote and what policies get put in place? How do you all think that that plays out? I can see your wheels turning, Nathan. I like it. I like it. I can see your wheels turning. It's something to think about. Because, like I understand wanting to vote for the person. I also know that in some elections that I've participated in Georgia and in Tennessee, a vote for the person, especially in the primary or whatever, or in Georgia, was going to mean, or it was going to mean, like not voting along those lines was going to mean a vote for the other person. If I wasn't going to vote for Biden in this particular, race, it was going to be a vote in the other direction. So how do you think that that works in terms of the policies that mean the most to you guys?
Well, I think Mary Peltola, a Democrat, won as a representative because people believed that she cared about those issues that you talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another thing that I'm working on that I want to piggyback onto this foundational data is, so when we were looking at electoral districts or counties that don't have progressive party representation, where you just don't have someone there who's kind of spearheading things up and there's no leadership there. But then the second one is near and dear to my heart. So people who have been introduced to me for the last few months, they know that healthcare and like social justice issues are my hot buttons. And like, I'm from Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, like right on the state line. And most people know me because I led a healthcare protest against a medical monopoly that they created here. Like we lived outside of a hospital for 257 days, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? So healthcare is a hot button issue for me, but that's also because it was personal. So, the first thing that this medical monopoly wanted to do was close the NICU that saved my grandbaby's life, right? So pretty personal. And so when I start to think about the issues and how they work, one of the biggest issues for rural places is hospital closures, right? It's happening in so many rural places. So another piece of data, and it's not ready yet, but let me just share it with you guys. So my latest project is looking to stack on top of that data where you have rural hospitals that are at risk for closure. So there's a couple of agencies out there that have made a list. And so this is what it looks like. So I've already done Georgia. So Georgia had 9 counties for me that I identified as being able to make strong progressive moves or flip those counties. There were 9. Of those 9 counties, 5 of them have hospitals at risk of closure, right? So if I say to Georgians, hey, 54%, or if I say to funders, 54% of the rural counties where we can actually flip counties, they have hospitals at risk of closure. Not only is it good data to have, right? But it's real numbers. And so the way that I looked at this, so this is the patient service margin, and this is the total margin. And even if the total margin, I'm going to give you this one as an example, Candler, even if the total margin was 15%, right? And it's in the black. If the patient service margin was less than 5%, I still put them on here, because what that total margin is they may have a grant from the county or the state. They may have some additional money that's coming in, that's putting them in the black, that's not always guaranteed to be there, right? So that was the interest. And if you look, like, I haven't gotten to yours yet, don't be sad, it's coming. But I've been working on this list for all of the counties that I've been doing, and anything that is in yellow, that is a county that has made it onto our list for that state. So the goal for me is, and this is my thought process, and I would love your feedback, because you all are more candidate and issue oriented, I would think that it would be easier than that party line to find solid issue campaigns that you can build momentum on in the off cycles to ride into the next election cycle, you know? So like for me, we have our first real challenger against Marsha Blackburn in a minute, right? It's Gloria Johnson. And I'm in an area that is 80% Republican, and they are diehard, but they also trust me because of my healthcare sacrifice for them, right? So I've always had Gloria's ear. She's one of the only state reps who's ever stood up for us against our monopoly, even though we're not her district, right? So I can take who she is and what she's done without us even being in her district, and use that issue that I know is super important to the people who live here, and use that issue to bring them out in a more progressive manner. And I would think that it would be easier to do when you don't have such partisan politics in Alaska. What do you all think?
I definitely like what you said about solid issue campaigns we can build in the off cycle to ride into the election cycle. This is not we don't just organize during the election cycle. This is something that needs to be a movement.
It has to be, because what I know, it's funny because people, if I say this about rural people, you all are going to nod yes. They don't trust outsiders, right? They're often the most neglected. They know that people don't come in unless they want something from them, right? But it's the same with inner cities. I can tell you that I ran into the same thing when I was standing in the most urban places in Atlanta and when I was standing in the most rural places in Georgia. It's the same type of people. They are the neglected. They are the forgotten. They are the folks that are losing the most. And so what I find is that we are more alike than we are different. And the same issues impact us, but maybe in different ways. So housing is an issue for both of those areas, but for different reasons, right? And so being able to build on those issues and find the issue that resonates the most with that area, that's what you build on. And if you stay on that message in the off cycle and you talk to people about it, so I live by this theory. It's this motto that I have, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right? So if I'm coming to talk to you in 2023, before I need your vote, before I'm going to ask you about voting, before I do any of that, and if I say to you, hey, did you, if you were going to tell me what your greatest hardships are, what are they? Right? And then I'm able to say, so like I talk to folks about housing in Atlanta, and I would talk. So we went to this big festival down in Old Nat. It's Old Nat Day is what they call it. And it's, one of the impoverished areas. And so I said, I don't know about you guys. I said, but do you know anybody that's like had trouble paying their rent? Because I have, right? And I raised my hand. And so other people raised their hand. And then I said, exactly. And I said, well, did you know that there's $400 million sitting in our housing assistance fund? But under Kemp, 60% of the people that apply are denied. And I had a girl pop up and go, I'm one of those 60%. I applied. Right? So now I've got an issue that is definitely resonate. It resonates with them. And I've got somebody in the crowd who says, that's me. And then we can talk about, okay, well, this is what this candidate wants to do about that. And what would it look like for you if you got the rental assistance that you need? Those types of things are how so then I'm not talking Republican, I'm not talking Democrat, I'm talking let's put a roof over your head because we already have the money sitting in a bank account. Right? And so, but that's how I use the policy for the constituent, right? But I use the data to the funder and to the philanthropic organization. I use the data because I go to the funder or the philanthropic organization and I say, listen, Alaska's a little bit different. I know you like to fund Democrats all over the country, but we vote more along issue and person. And you can say, let me show you just how true that is. We have more unaffiliated and nonpartisan registered voters than we have Democrat and Republican combined. Boom. Now you've given statistics, like it's true data, and you can show them and say, see, but this is why I can get money from pretty much anybody. Right? I can double my money now because I have more about this. And so then it's about, so who are the organizations who are interested in political movement in the areas and the issues that resonate most with Alaskans? Right? And so those are the people that I take the data to, and I can talk about, these are the issues, and this is how you get these people, and these people are this close. Does that make sense? So it's two different ways that you use the information. One is for messaging and constituents and getting them on board. The other one is for getting the money that you need. And then the third possibility is to create the candidate with the policies that are going to resonate with the people. A lot of times in rural areas, I know it's true here where I'm from, we don't have enough candidates to run. We got the same good old boys getting elected every daggone year because nobody runs against them. So how do you recruit people and get them to have the policies that resonate with people? Maggie, you look like I see you writing stuff down and thinking about stuff. What you want to add something?
I've got a lot going on today. Alaska is just so different than any other state in the United States. It is so vast, and so much of it is rural and off the road system. People have to fly places or take a boat. I mean, it's not like a typical state where you can drive across, in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are a lot of challenges, I think. And yes, certainly the messaging is crucial. And, I left the state for a while, and it was much more liberal in my younger days here. I was born and raised here.
Okay.
And when I came back, I guess 8 years ago, I just look around and said, what happened? And, it's different than the place I grew up in, certainly. Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot of working pieces that we have to overcome. I mean, food security is huge for whether you're in the city or out in the rural community, if you're subsistence hunting or fishing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I drive by the food bank line once a week, and the number of cars that are there is phenomenal. The number of homeless people we have here in Anchorage is, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I've seen it in Seattle, but I just am astounded. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really conservative people up here.
So I noticed the same thing where I'm from. And if you look at the maps, Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia were blue maps just 8 years ago. No, in 2008, we were blue, right? And what changed? Well, we had Obama, right? And things did change. So one of the things that I share with people, especially here, and I will never forget the day that I read it. Lindsey Graham was at the 2012 Republican National Convention, and they asked him, why was Mitt Romney losing so badly to Obama? And Lindsey Graham said, he said, we're losing the demographics race. We are simply not generating, and I'm quoting, we are not generating enough angry white guys. And if I look at the whole country for the last 10 years, they have been consistently generating angry white guys, right? And they've been focused a lot on the rural community. The one thing that I give the Republican Party credit for, well, there's two things. One is they have tapped into emotion, which we have not done since Obama left office. Number two, they have developed a long-term strategy, and they are hell-bent on sticking to it, right? They don't slack off in the off cycles. They are on it, and they are loving on rural communities, at least with newspapers and attention and talking points, even if they aren't doing policy that actually helps rural people, right? So that's part of what I've seen, along with other things as well. I see everybody kind of doing different things. So I want to go back and show you, because I showed you a little bit I've only given two people glimpses at the hospital data. It's you guys in the last one. But it's something that I'm excited about, because I really do believe that if we can tie into the issues that matter the most to people, and you guys are in a really unique position. So remember when we're talking about off cycle. So I would say right now, because you guys are about to hit, I say about to hit, I think about when I lived there and having sun, 24 hours out of my day, and then going into dark for such a long period of time, which I definitely was not used to. It's beautiful, but I'm like, good God, I'm okay if I never see snow again. But it's okay. But I think about that. And so what I say is, okay, so how do you reach those people, and how do you make it prevalent? So Maggie, if I'm saying to people, we know that we have a problem with our postal system, I would look at how are your current candidates voting with that regard, right? What are they voting against your postal service? Are they, how are they impacting, that legislation and that funding that needs to happen there? So that would be one thing. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's lack of workers. There's just not enough people to fill those positions. I don't know if it's so much policy. I know the Postal Service is a huge issue, but I think locally it's just really difficult. Or the post office is in, the grocery store, and the person who's supposed to man it is there for a few hours a day, but, maybe they don't show up for a day, maybe they do. But I know a lot of ballots didn't make it to town, to be counted in time for their votes to count. And maybe it was because their postmark was a day late or something. And, we do a lot to encourage early voting, but it's an issue that we need to grapple with.
Yeah.
And advertise those jobs better.
I was going to say, so I see two things. I see definitely advertising the jobs better. I also say that's one hell of a policy for a candidate to run on, right? To have someone who says, hey, I understand, and I want your vote to count, whether you vote for me or not, right? And so I'm going to do everything I can. And these are my ideas around bringing in more postal workers. This is my idea around, getting more funding for this. And this is, you know what I mean? So I would look at it from that perspective as a solid place for a candidate to build significant policy that would matter to people in a nonpartisan, unpartisan way. I can remember canvassing in Marietta, and this girl, I'm wearing my Stacy gear, and she says, I voted for Kemp in the primary. And I said, that's okay. And I said, I want you to vote no matter who you vote for. And she looked at me like I'd grown 3 heads. And I was like, no, and I said, you do have, she said, so you mean I have to vote again? And I was like, yes, that was just your primary in August. Like the election is in November. So you absolutely have to vote again. And she was like, well, I didn't realize that. Yeah. So thank you. You can thank me for telling you to go vote. You know what I mean? But again, that goes back to people wanting to know that you care about their vote, even if it's not for you. So like, I look at you all as having tremendous challenges that are unique. And I think you all have data that opens you up to a ton of money that's out there. So I would look at your number one issues. So whether that is food insecurity, your postal issues, what would you say? It's got to be healthcare is in there somewhere. What would you say is your third?
Well, I was going to say there's not a lot of medical facilities in a lot of those villages. So we're looking at people flying places to go to a hospital.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
from
generally the cost of living is just so high in rural Alaska. Our town is relatively lucky, being only 20-minute flight from Juneau, but still $6 a gallon for gas, and we're about to have our electric rates raised to 59 cents a kilowatt hour, or 54, I mean, and it's expensive.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Go
Cost of
ahead.
living is huge. I mean, the further you get away from a hub, the more expensive fuel is, the more expensive groceries are. I mean, it's ridiculous.
They were ridiculous. I remember when I got there in 95, I was like, oh my God, are you crazy?
Yeah.
So I hear you. So let's talk about how can we use, if I put food insecurity, postal, healthcare, and simply we're getting into almost what we're talking about. What did I say? Healthcare, economic stability, housing, and education. We're at 3 of the 4 pillars. And so within them, how do we take this data and go to the places that have the money? So have you all identified the organizations and the funders out there that are in these specific niches? Have you thought about that? Like who are the people that we can go to in terms of, these particular issues that are going to want to give us money to bring these things in or to do these things? You know what I mean?
Well, speaking only for myself and the few people that I network with, I would say definitely we have not gotten to that point. I'm not sure we even know how we would spend money if we got it.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there's a lot of kind of networking kinds of contacts that need to be
Mm-hmm.
made by through our social networks, people that know people. We can't have some outside organizer coming in and traveling around and
Yeah.
that's not going to do the job. So, but there probably are, maybe there's somebody that's already a rural Alaskan that can be hired to do something like that and
Mm-hmm.
help out. I think there's manpower shortage of, people get burned out and
Mm-hmm.
exhausted after an election cycle and just want to take a break. And so
Yep.
how to make that more sustainable, it would be how to use the money, but I don't even know what that is, so I don't know how to ask for it.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons that we do the monthly networking calls. Our goal is to get as many rural organizers, candidates, organizations on that call. It's the last Thursday of every month at 2:00, right? And the goal is to do exactly what you're talking about, to network, to talk about where to get funding, to talk about what that looks like. How do you make those pitches? How do you network? How do you train? So like for me, one of my strongest suits is messaging, right? I do organizer training and talk to people about, okay, well, you've got 4 minutes. How do you engage somebody of opposing views in 4 minutes? How do you talk about issues that are touchy, that are usually triggering and divisive, and win people over in conversation? And so being able to 100% equip the folks in your local area to do that. And you want to look at folks who can maybe walk alongside you a little bit as you all kind of build that up. And I look at it like a relay race. When you talk about having, like burnout, that's one of the things that we talked about in the exit interview project. Is I can tell you right now, I was exhausted come December. After I ended Stacey's campaign and then I worked the Senate runoff, I literally had to throw away a pair of shoes. My shoes that I wore, they were done. There was nothing left of them. That is a true story. But so now we have to strategize. It's like a relay race. Okay. So I would start to outline what are those communities and those areas that you do have to travel to by boat and by plane. What are those? Have you made a list of them? What are the best times of the year to travel to those places? Right? What are the places that you can get to fairly easy? If I'm going to do a door knocking campaign and I'm going to do it in a particular area, how many doors can I knock in 8 hours? And make the most out of, the densest population that I have that's possible. What are the events that are happening in the remote areas where people naturally gather, right? So like here in the summertime, every Friday night, they have a concert in the park and everybody has lawn chairs and, there's vendors and there's people out there doing this and doing that. That's a great opportunity to set up a booth and to pass out flyers and information and things like that. And when you do that, for me, this is what I always say to people when I'm somewhere that I know they don't want to talk about voting. I literally am like, I know this is the last thing you want to talk about. I would rather have a drink and be watching the concert too, girl. And, right, we've got an election coming up, right? And I would be failing you and me if I didn't want to have just a couple of minutes to talk to you. Can you give me 3 minutes? And then if I don't make sense, you can just tell me goodbye, right? And normally they'll say, okay, girl, what you got? Right. I've talked to like Black women in Atlanta when it's like 90 some degrees. And I'd be like, girl, listen, my hair is sweating out. I know your weave is like itching. I'm not going to take but 2 minutes. And then they laugh because I've connected with them about something that says neither one of us want to be doing this. And we have to do this. So that is the way that I would approach it. Is I would say, okay, where are my places that are the hardest to reach? What's the best time for me to get there? Who are the people that I already know that have a heart for some of these things? Who are my influencers in this area? Are there people in this area that have lots of TikTok followers or that have lots of whatever followers? And, when they're talking about, those types of things, who are those people? Because you can leverage those people on these issues, right? And so start to look at it at how you do that. And then your biggest advantage is the fact that you have so many unaffiliated, nonpartisan voters, because that makes you a lovely space for people and nonprofits who can't align with one party or the other, but they care a whole lot about certain issues. And so now it's just about networking in spaces where you can tap into those organizations and who they are and find out who's got what and where. They laugh at me because I've never been very, quote unquote, like politically oriented. I am issue oriented all day. So I don't bother to learn people's names until they're important to me. Like, I'm not one of those people that knows, like celebrities could walk by me and I wouldn't know, because like, until you are relevant to the thing that I want to get done, I don't know. But tell me who's running up healthcare stuff. Tell me who's leading this movement. Tell me who's the person that unlocks this magic door, and I'm going to know who that person is. So that's what you want to start to outline. And then here's one of the greatest things. So one of the things that I talked to Matt about. So he was telling me, we were talking about Georgia, and he mentioned Peach County, Georgia. And I said, Matt, what's the biggest issue in Peach County, Georgia? And he said, cannabis. And I said, perfect. Who's doing an issue campaign around cannabis? And he said, nobody. And I said, okay, so do you know what I would do if that were me? I would go to a state that I know has already legalized cannabis, like Colorado. I would find a county that is demographically similar to Peach County, Georgia, right? I would reach out to the city manager and I would find out how much money has been brought into the county through the legalization of cannabis. How many businesses have been opened? How many employees have been generated? What have they used that money for in the state of Colorado and the county that's there, right? Because now I can come back to Peach County, Georgia, and I can say to folks, so listen, if we're able to do this issue, and I'm the candidate, as the candidate, I can say, listen, we already have a blueprint on how to do this. We're not reinventing the wheel. So imagine if we legalize cannabis and it brings us 4 new businesses and employs 50 new people and it generates X amount of revenue to go in our school systems, right? Now, all of a sudden, I'm talking everybody's language, right? So those are the things where you can use this information to go at it. And you can say, listen, voter registration ain't an issue, but our voter registration numbers could be fake and we don't even know because it's just something that automatically happens because people want money. So now we have to take the temperature. Now we have to take the temperature. Who can do a polling? Who can do a survey? Who can do something that says, hey, are you really interested in what's happening in your political arena? How do you gauge who's involved and who's not? And then figuring out what those issues are. So if I were going to let you all walk away from this, the things that I would say first and foremost to you is I'm extremely excited about your voter numbers, your voting data, because it does open you up to money and funds from a variety of people, no matter what party their affiliation is or where their policies lean, because you do have, I'm going to pull it back up real quick and look. Let me look right here. All right, so when I go down to your voting data, so you're unaffiliated. So if I were to put together your Dem, your Rep, and your Independent, that's going to be 5,500, give or take, right? Your unaffiliated is 6,500 by itself. And your nonpartisan is another 1,700. You literally have more people in these 2 columns than the other 3 combined. That is strong data to be able to go to somebody and say, this is why you should give us your money, right? You want more people to vote for Dem policy? Give us your money. You want more people to vote conservative? Give us your money. Who cares, right? Because it's about the policy and it's about what's best for the people. That's what we want to run on. And we want to run on the things that are important. Food insecurity, cost of living. Economic stability has to do with job creation, which you talked about with your postal issue, right? But it also has to do with housing and cost of living and things like that. So how do you offset those? And how do you do it in a way that doesn't decimate the resources that you have? How do you increase tourism? What do you have that is unique to you and where you are? Do you know how many people that want that rare destination experience, those people that want something that's never been done before? How do you market yourselves? So I think of organizing like dating. So I don't know if you've ever done online dating or not, but you literally have like one paragraph to make somebody swipe right or swipe left, right? When you're talking to people, you have 30 to 60 seconds to get them to swipe right, right? And that's just to get them to want to continue to talk to you, whether that's a funder, whether that's a constituent, whether that's a philanthropic organization, whether that is, an existing candidate. That's what you have to do. So I would start almost every conversation with, did you know that we have more unaffiliated and nonpartisan registered voters than we have Democrat, Republican, and Independent combined? We are the dream of what the country could look like if we got over partisan politics. How's that for one hell of a pitch? Right? We are the dream if we could get through partisan politics. So help me show the world what we can do. Help us lead the country in how we vote based on policy and what's best for people. Yeah. So that's the most significant data that I would have for you all, is how to use your voter registration numbers to position yourself with constituents, candidates, and an organization and funders. And then focus on the policies that are most impactful for people so that whoever you're voting for puts those things first across the board. And remember that you are a part of a larger picture, right? The rest of us can't afford to lose any progressive people or any progressive slots that we have, you know? And so that's something that we all have to keep in mind while we're voting within our own counties and within our own states. We are part of a much bigger picture. And we have some real serious issues when it comes to democracy and the things that are on the line for us. And so we want to make sure that we all do these things so that we win all the way across the board. And when I say we, I am not talking about a party. I'm talking about the people, you know? Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns for me before we wrap up? I would love to see more Alaska folks on our monthly call.
And what time zone is 2 o'clock?
Eastern.
Eastern.
Yeah. So what is that for you?
10 a.m.
Okay. Yeah.
That's kind of hard for me.
Yeah. And maybe this is something, because we were talking about this earlier, is that because we do, that's why I was like, Afton had you guys scheduled at a different time. And I was like, wait, it's Alaska. I need at least 3 because of the time zone difference. And so, you know, I've thought about maybe we have more than one, you know, and put like a couple of time zones in one meeting and then a couple of them. And I don't know, maybe because I've only been over the monthly call for a couple of months and maybe the other person wasn't willing to do one later in the day. But I am willing to do one later in the day. I personally think that right now, a little bit of sacrifice is worth it if it makes a difference as we head into the next election. So that's just my personal take on it. I'll sleep when I feel like we're okay. We're not okay right now.
Yeah, I have a standing meeting every day at 10 a.m. So
okay, got it. Okay.
I won't be able to attend every meeting, but I have it on my calendar to join the rural organizing calls. I do think that rural organizing is the way, especially in Alaska, but it's got tremendous potential, and so I'm interested in learning more about it. And I'm not going to throw myself under the bus or kill myself doing this. I'm not going to fall on my sword to make this happen, but I have something to contribute.
Awesome. And that's all that it is, right? Is we all give what we can and we'll make good things happen. That I'm sure of. So you guys will get an email, and that email will be this recording. You're welcome, Andrea. It will also be the PDF, right? It'll be a link to the full Top 100 Rural County report. The exit interview project will be in there. And then as I finish the hospital data, we'll probably do another round of these and really look at how to make it county or district specific to give people some really good talking points and issues to head into next year with. Cool.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank
That's
you
all
so
I got.
much.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming and contributing. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks or at some point in time. Okay.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.